LaRusso's injured leg. This helps Johnny secure a momentary lead, but LaRusso manages to knock him out with a kick and wins the competition. The series then fast-forwards to the present. A much older and unsuccessful Johnny lives in a cheap motel and works as an electrician for a living. He is a deadbeat dad and has somehow managed to get himself in the sex offenders list. Outside his home, Johnny is approached by his new young neighbor, Miguel, but the former drives away as he has no interest in befriending people. On his way to work, Johnny notices an advertisement of a more successful Daniels Auto Company on the highway and scoffs in disgust. At work, he gets in trouble with his boss and ends up losing his job. Frustrated, he drives to a mart and orders a slice of pizza for dinner. There, he notices Miguel being bullied by other teens, but he decides to ignore them until they push Miguel onto his car. This enrages him and he beats the crap out of the bullies using karate, much to Miguel's astonishment. Soon, the cops arrive and arrest Johnny. The next day, Johnny is released from the jail, and at the motel, Miguel thanks him for saving him and pleads with him to teach him karate. Expectedly, Johnny turns him down and returns to his home. There, he encounters his stepfather, Sid, and the latter's nurse, Rhonda. It turns out that Sid bailed Johnny out. He lectures his stepson for being a bum before storming out with Rhonda. Though Sid is hard on Johnny, he always looks out for him because of the promise he made to his late wife and Johnny's mother. That evening, Johnny watches TV to forget about his woes, but when he sees yet another advertisement of Daniel's company, he smashes the TV in anger. He then decides to go for a drive and ends up at the All Valley Sports Arena where he competed with Daniel. As he gets out of his car and reminisces about his old days, a car full of rowdy teenagers slam into Johnny's parked car. Johnny loses his temper and screams at the teens, but they manage to flee. When the car doesn't start, Johnny calls a mechanic and gets his car towed. To his dismay, he soon learns that the mechanic works for Daniel's company. Next morning, he goes over to Daniel's showroom to pick up his car while trying his best to keep a low profile because he doesn't want to run into his arch nemesis. Unfortunately, he ends up encountering Daniel. The latter introduces Johnny to his employees and subtly makes fun of him while offering to repair his car for free. Johnny turns the offer down, and Daniel asks him to at least take the Daniel Auto Group's signature souvenir, a plant. When Daniel goes over to get him a plant, Johnny learns that the teenage girl who wrecked his car is Daniel's daughter, Samantha. This, along with Daniel's condescending behavior, moves Johnny, and he decides to turn his life around. He returns home and agrees to be Miguel's sensei. Johnny leases out a space and starts his own dojo. On his way to work, Daniel comes across the dojo and it sends him down memory lane. Inside the studio, Johnny teaches his only student, Miguel. It's revealed that Miguel has asthma, but Johnny orders him to keep his weaknesses aside. Soon, a man from the city health department arrives and gives Johnny a list of requirements needed to open up an exercise studio. The man explains all the paperwork and basic requirements that need to be done and leaves saying he'll be back for inspection another week. Later, the LaRusso family is seen at a party, except for Samantha. Daniel tries to get his video game addict son, Anthony, to take part in physical activities, but without success. He then complains to his wife Amanda, but she convinces him to let their son be. It's then revealed that Sam isn't at the family party because she's secretly thrown a party of her own for her new, cool friends at her family home. Daniel returns home early and finds out about the party. Enraged, he embarrasses Sam in front of her friends and kicks them out. This leads to an argument between Amanda and Daniel over their children's upbringing. The latter ultimately realizes that he can't nudge his daughter in the right direction by embarrassing her in front of her friends. He makes up with his daughter, and when the two bond, Sam confides in him about her boyfriend, Kyler. The next day at school, Miguel joins his two new friends, Dimitri and Eli, at the cafeteria. Sam and her friends quickly grab Miguel's attention and he tries to make the first move. However, Sam's group is joined by Kyler and other guys, prompting Miguel to walk back to his table. Later, as Johnny is teaching Miguel the basics of Cobra Strike, he suddenly gets a call from his son, Robbie's vice principal, who reveals that Robbie was found with a drug. This alarms Johnny, and he tries to talk some sense into his son, but Robbie doesn't respect him and hangs up the call. Frustrated, Johnny returns back and tells Miguel to picture his enemy and punch the dummy. Miguel obliges and punches the dummy repeatedly while remembering Kyler's face. At LaRusso's home, Kyler joins the family for dinner. They get to talking, and Daniel learns that Johnny beat Kyler and his friends up. This upsets Daniel, and he goes over to confront Johnny. When Daniel warns him to stay away from Sam's friends, Johnny questions the kind of company Sam is keeping. This naturally upsets Daniel, and the two almost get into it until Miguel appears. In the next scene, we're shown some scenes from Miguel's house. He has cranked up music in his room and is practicing some punches. Just then, he gets called by his granny and is shortly joined over dinner by his mom. She notices some bruises on his hand and asks him about them. Miguel hesitates, but just as he's about to speak, he's interrupted by his granny. Later, Miguel is practicing really hard at the studio, punching the dummy as hard as he can. Meanwhile, Johnny looks at some paper and then toward the whiteboard. He asks Miguel if he's got some friends who'd want to join the karate classes, but gets no response. Miguel instead asks his sensei about kicking lessons, to which Johnny adds on, saying he's still got time to hop on to that section. At Daniel's, he watches his daughter kiss Kyler from the window and is worried about what his old rival told him a night back. However, Amanda calms him down, saying Kyler looks absolutely harmless and that Sam will be fine. The next scene is from school. Miss Blatt talks about cyberbullying and how it affects one's mentality, but no one really seems to be attentive. In the meantime, Miguel educates his fellow friends about the karate lesson, which Dimitri doesn't find enticing. The teacher finishes her speech by announcing the Halloween dance and requests everyone to dress well. Alicia, whom Sam's friends call a nerd, shares her costume idea with Sam. Sadly, she's body-shamed by all the girls, and Sam feels sorry about it. Elsewhere, Johnny is working really hard to get more students to his karate studio. He hires the homeless lady he met at the mini-mart a few days back and asks her to hold Cobra Kai's board. To advertise his business more, he goes on distributing and sticking posters around the street. However, when he gets no response, Johnny is heartbroken. On the other hand, Daniel enters Sam's room looking for her, but realizes that she's in the shower. As he's about to leave, her laptop gets notifications that catch his attention. He sneaks on her laptop and opens Kyle's and Sam's chat. Just then, his wife arrives on the scene and interrupts him. Startled, Daniel clarifies he was just checking the Wi-Fi on Sam's laptop and leaves. Meanwhile, Johnny returns to his studio disappointed and finds the homeless woman sitting and eating her food. He also finds Miguel standing outside waiting for him. Johnny calls it an off day as he's not in the mood, but Miguel doesn't understand why and hops inside to show him the Cobra Kai webpage he created. He goes on to explain how they can do the marketing and stuff. Just then, Miguel gets a call from his mom, which he doesn't pick up. Hearing the changed caller tune, Johnny smirks a little and asks the kid to meet him at midnight to learn kicks. Back at Sam's home, everyone's at the dining table. She tells how bad she feels about Alicia, but at the same time doesn't want to dress up as per her idea. Meanwhile, Daniel, who's concerned about his daughter, tells everyone that he's going to join Sam at the Halloween party. Expectedly, this annoys Sam, but she has no choice but to agree. Later at midnight, Johnny and Miguel catch up. Johnny takes Miguel by a swimming pool, ties his hands with ropes, and pushes him into the pool. As expected, Miguel starts drowning. Soon, Johnny pulls him up by his hair, tells him to use his legs, and then throws him in again. Miguel struggles, but he hasn't been able to untie the rope yet. Johnny pulls him up again and throws him in again. He desperately waits for his student to untie himself and come up. After several failed attempts, Miguel finally unties himself and keeps kicking in the water to keep himself floating. Next, the teacher-student duo gets into kick practice. Miguel is extremely happy with his performance and wishes he could tell his mom about it. On the other hand, Johnny wants to drive Miguel to the Halloween party to pick up a few more students. A while later, Miguel puts on his Halloween costume, but Johnny disapproves of it and orders his student to change it. Then comes the party scene, where everyone has dressed well. Through the fog enters Miguel dressed up in a skeleton costume. He walks up to his friends dressed as a necromancer and a plastic surgeon. Daniel is also present, and he's enjoying his time. Meanwhile, Johnny goes on sticking posters around the school. In the next scene, as Sam is dancing with Kyler, she notices her friend Alicia. The duo chat for a while and plan to hang out soon. Daniel, on the other hand, is joined by Miss Blatt. Just then, he notices a guy dressed in a skeleton costume, which reminds him of a scene from his school days where he was beaten up by a group of guys wearing the same costumes. Soon, he excuses himself and goes to see a poster on the wall. It's the Cobra Kai karate classes poster. After following the posters, he finds Johnny in the act. Daniel confronts his old rival and asks him to stop doing whatever he's up to. In the middle of their conversation, he sees Kyler holding Sam's hand and taking her out of the party. He again excuses himself and runs after the two. At the party, the three guys, Miguel, Dimitri, and Eli, watch other people dancing from a corner. They want to ask girls for a dance, but can't. On the other corner of the room is Alicia dressed up as a sodium molecule snacking on Cheetos. Sam's friends call her names and laugh at her. Meanwhile, Sam and Kyler go into a classroom where Sam gently kisses him. Kyler asks her to help him take off his belt, and this scene is seen by Sam's dad. Daniel furiously enters the room. Sam sees her dad and gets mad at him for embarrassing her in front of Kyle. Before things turn worse, Kyler takes out a bracelet from his pocket and says that it belonged to his grandma and he wanted to give it to Sam. Following the misunderstanding, Sam leaves the room angrily and goes to her girls, asking them to get out of the party. Just then, everyone's phone beeps, and it's a video message of Alicia eating Cheetos and being made fun of. Everyone in the room starts laughing at her and starts calling her names. This devastates Alicia, and Sam feels sad for her. When she can't take it any longer, she leaves the party heartbroken. In the next scene, Miguel and his friend are in the bathroom when they overhear Kyler telling his friends about the incident with Sam and her dad. It sounds as though Kyler had wrong intentions. Meanwhile, Eli mistakenly steps on something which catches Kyler and his friends' attention. Dimitri and Eli run out, but Miguel stays there and faces them eye to eye. They bully Miguel again, but this time he steps forward and kicks Kyler to the ground. Unfortunately, the other guys quickly subdue him and beat him up miserably. As Johnny finishes sticking his posters, he walks to see trophies and old photographs. Just then, the bullies come out of the bathroom bragging about the way they handled the kid. Johnny enters the room to find Miguel lying injured on the floor. Later, we see Lawrence's son, Robbie, at the Tech Town Service Center as one of the employees. A middle-aged man walks up to Robbie and hands over his crashed laptop to him. Robbie starts explaining technical things to the man, but the latter doesn't even give a shade of it. Hence, he decides to leave his device behind and get back after an hour. Robbie asks for the laptop's password for logging into the device and gets it very easily. In the next scene, as Robbie is about to leave with the laptop on his skateboard, he notices a piece of paper lying on the floor. He picks it up and sees his dad on it. However, he immediately throws it away and leaves with his friends. On the streets, Johnny is seen with a bundle of his business posters and cans. He is drinking and remembering the after incidents of the party. As Miguel was injured, he had carried him home. His mom gets horrified looking at her son and warns Johnny to stay away from him. Wandering the streets drunk, he sees an artist painting on the street walls and trades his cans for the spray paint. Elsewhere, Daniel is trying to make up with Sam for last night and prepares her favorite pancakes. However, Sam leaves the house without turning back at her father. Daniel sighs and drives to his work. On the way, he receives a call from his wife, who tells her about the billboard. On driving a few meters ahead, Daniel sees his hoarding board with a dick scribbled on his mouth. He can't stand it for even a second and calls the cops to file a complaint. Back at Miguel's house, he's lying on the sofa. His mom hands him an ice pack and a glass of juice. Mom insists on telling the school authority about the incident, but Miguel thinks it will just worsen the situation. He insists on learning more karate, but his mom clearly denies it. Just then, his granny comes into the frame and supports his decision, saying he needs more practice. However, the mom still doesn't approve of her son's company with Johnny. In the next scene, Johnny is lying on the floor completely drunk when he receives a call from Robbie's vice principal, who informs him that Robbie's been out of school for a month. Although taken aback, he assures that Robbie will be in school soon and hangs up the call. Later, as he's about to leave home, he finds Miguel waiting outside. He tells the kid to stop seeing him and that the studio is now closed. At school, everyone is mocking Alicia, snorting like pigs. Sam sees it all and feels bad about it. She walks to Alicia to talk, but the latter walks out, showing how hurt she is by the bullying. Shortly after that, Kyler surprises Sam and hugs her from behind. He tells her about the movie date. Elsewhere, a delivery guy comes to deliver 100 sausages which Daniel has no idea about. He checks the bills and sees it was sent by a man named Tom. He then calls his workers who've gone to paint off the billboard and gets mad seeing they haven't painted over the dick yet. In the meantime, Robbie and his friends are watching videos on the stolen laptop when Johnny bumps into them. The father-son duo gets into a series of arguments, which ends with Robbie insulting his dad and sending him away by smashing the door behind him. In the next scene, Miguel and his friends are discussing the Halloween party sitting at the library. Dimitri thinks it was insane to fight the bullies, while Eli doesn't think that way. After a while, Kyler joins them, and just when Miguel and his friends are about to leave, Kyler holds Eli by his face and bullies him. Miguel can't bear it and speaks for his friend. Hearing this, Kyler throws Eli away and starts messing with Miguel. This time, however, Miguel refrains from fighting and leaves with his friends. Surprisingly, Sam is watching all this, and she's taken aback. Elsewhere, Daniel and his wife have a meeting with the marketing team, who show them what his business rival, Tom Cole, is up to. Daniel watches the video and leaves the room without uttering a word. Later, he goes to Cole Motors and rants to Tom about stealing his ideas. Tom makes fun of Daniel, and everyone in the showroom laughs at him. He leaves no chance to make fun of the billboard incident either. Enraged, Daniel turns and backkicks the bubble tea in his hand. Everyone in the showroom looks at it shocked and speechless. After a while, a content Daniel leaves the place. Meanwhile, Sam and Kyler are at the movies. Kyler makes his move and tries kissing Sam, but the latter backs off and tells him that she saw everything he did to those kids in the library. Kyler tries defending himself, saying that they're his friends, but Sam doesn't look happy. In an attempt to win her back, Kyler starts touching her thighs, but it immediately backfires. Sam throws him back, stands up, and leaves the hall. In the next scene, Johnny is having his meal at a restaurant when he notices a father and son across the table and gets emotional looking at them. He then stands in front of Miguel's house, convinces his mom to let him teach Miguel karate, and leaves, realizing she's not convinced. The next morning at Daniel's, he prepares breakfast and calls his kids. Anthony comes in first, followed by his sister. Surprisingly, Sam is no longer angry with her dad, and she smiles and sits down for breakfast. She then discloses to her family that she's no longer seeing Kyler, and teases her dad for being happy about that. In the last scene, as Johnny is packing up his trophies in boxes, Miguel enters the studio and informs him that his mom has agreed to the karate training. The episode ends as Daniel figures out the person behind the dick blunder and starts plotting revenge. That was all from the video. I hope you liked it. Subscribe for more content like this, and hit the like button to help us out. Also, leave a comment if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Until next time, take care.
The film began with a high school student called Seun. He was the smartest student in his classroom. He had reserved and introverted personality. Every day, He spent most of his time to study. He didn't have friends at school. His classmates hated him because he was too smart. Because he didn't have friends, nobody respected him at school despite of his great achievements. On the contrary, his classmate called Young Bin was very respected. When Si-eun received an award as first place winner in a mathematics competition, nobody clapped their hands. But when Young Bin received an award as third place winner, the whole class clapped their hands. Young Bin was a troublemaker in his class, but he was quite smart. There were many students in their classroom who were bullied by him and his group. They also bullied and robbed some money from other students. Young Bin tried to bully Si-eun when Si-eun was studying. Young Bin was jealous of Si-eun because Si-eun defeated him in the mathematics competition. Even though Si-eun was an introverted student who didn't have friends, he was never afraid of Young Bin and his group. He didn't even care when Young Bin threatened him. The school baseball team came to their classroom. They were looking for a student called Suho. They wanted to take revenge on Suho for beating up their friends. Even though they tried to beat him up together with baseball bats, Suho managed to defeat them because he was an ex-fighter of MMA. When Si-eun came home, he gave his certificate of appreciation to his father. His father was proud of him, but Si-eun wasn't proud of himself because he was lonely even when he was with his family. Si-eun only lived with his father since their parents got divorced. He lacked of affection from his parents. His father was very busy with his works. Meanwhile, his mother was a teacher who was teaching at a distance. It was difficult for Si-eun to see his mother. He could only watch his mother's videos every day. Because of his family problem, Si-eun became a reserved and reclusive person. The next morning, as usual, Si-eun came early to school. He saw Suho sleeping in their classroom. They had physical education class that day, but Si-eun couldn't find his tracksuit. He believed Young Bin was the one who stole it. As the consequence, Si-eun had to wear his uniform in physical education class. Si-eun was the top student in all classes except physical education class. He wasn't really good in physical education class. After physical education class was over, Si-eun confronted Young Bin and his group. He asked Young Bin to leave him alone. Young Bin and his group felt humiliated by Si-eun, so they choked and threatened him. Suddenly, a teacher came and interrupted them. Young Bin and his group stopped what they did. They said that they were just joking around. There was a transfer student called Bum-suk in Si-eun's classroom. He moved from an elite high school. Bum-suk refused to admit that he came from a wealthy family because he didn't want to be taken advantage of. Si-eun came and told Young Bin to move from his desk. Young Bin was annoyed by him. Si-eun took a pen to protect himself in case Young Bin attacked him. Suddenly, Suho told Young Bin and his group to shut up. He was mad because his sleeping was disturbed by them. At night, as usual, Young Bin and his group hanged out in a club and ordered a drug. They did that every day. Young Bin met the drug dealer who was also his cousin. He asked him what would happen if the fentanyl he had ordered was applied to human skin. The drug dealer told him that it would cause confusion, dizziness, blurred vision, nausea, and vomiting. The next day, the class had an examination. As usual, Si-eun had prepared himself well. Young Bin came late to school. He asked Bum-suk to go with him because he said that their homeroom teacher wanted to meet him. Turned out, Bum-suk was brought to school canteen. Young Bin asked him to apply the fentanyl to Si-eun's neck while they were taking the examination later. Bum-suk agreed to do what Young Bin told him because he was afraid of him. When they were about to take the examination, Bum-suk tapped Si-eun's neck from behind. Bum-suk said that there was a fly on Si-eun's neck. At first, Si-eun was mad at him, but after the teacher called him, Si-eun focused back on his examination. While Si-eun was taking his examination, his vision suddenly started to become blurred. He also had difficulty to stay focused. He left the classroom to go to the bathroom. When Si-eun returned to his classroom, he realized that there was a fentanyl on his neck. He suddenly slapped his cheek. The whole class was surprised by him. They were paying attention to him. Si-eun kept slapping his cheek so he could stay focused. After the class had finished taking the examination, they began to check their answers. Si-eun realized that he had one incorrect answer. He got frustrated because of it. He got up from his chair, brought a pen, and attacked Young Bin relentlessly. He also stabbed Young Bin's friend with his pen. Young Bin fell from his chair with a face that was covered in blood. There was nobody in the classroom who dared to intervene Si-eun. When Si-eun tried to step on Young Bin's face, Soo suddenly stopped him and pushed him away. He thought that it was too much. Si-eun was annoyed by him. He took a chair to fight him. Unfortunately, Soo managed to avoid his attacks. Suddenly a teacher came to their classroom. Because of that incident, Young Bin had to be admitted to hospital for treatment. Si-eun was taken by his teacher to apologize to Young Bin's parents, but Young Bin's mother kept scolding him because she was furious at him. Si-eun told her that he was drugged with a fentanyl by Young Bin while they were taking an examination. At first, Young Bin denied that the fentanyl was his, but Si-eun proved what he said by rummaging in Young Bin's bag. A box of fentanyl was found in his bag. Young Bin's mother was shocked to see that. Finally, the school decided to transfer Young Bin to another school. They also agreed to keep this incident of drug use by their student as a secret to keep their good reputation. When Si-eun returned home, he didn't say anything about what happened at school that day. Si-eun's father suspected that Si-eun had gotten into a fight, but he didn't care about it. He thought it was a normal thing that happened among teenagers. The next day, two of Young Bin's friends approached Si-eun angrily. They asked him to meet them after school, but without a single fear. Si-eun asked them to meet him right at that time. They didn't need to wait until the school was over. With angry faces, Young Bin's friends followed Si-eun to a bathroom. Si-eun closed the bathroom's door so nobody could see them. They didn't realize that Si-eun had brought his favorite weapon, which was his pen. As Si-eun was walking toward them step by step, they were getting intimidated by him. They remembered the incident where Si-eun was getting out of control. They couldn't move their body when they remembered it. Apparently, Si-eun didn't want to attack them. He only told them to leave him alone. When Si-eun came out of the bathroom, all of his classmates praised him for defeating Young Bin and his group. Si-eun was annoyed by them because suddenly they were being friendly to him. All this time, they had ostracized him and pretended like he didn't exist. Young Bin was visited by his cousin. Suk-dae warned Young Bin to not overdo anything. Young Bin asked Suk-dae to beat up Si-eun. He would pay him if he was willing to do it. At night, when Si-eun was heading home, he saw Soo working part-time. Apparently, apart from being a student, Soo also worked part-time as a food delivery courier at a restaurant. After school, he would go to work so he could earn some money to survive. Since he lost his parents, he only lived with his grandmother. But after he finished working, he didn't come home. He chose to sleep at school instead because he would come late to school if he slept at home. After Si-eun found out about Soo's story, he didn't wake him up every morning anymore. He appreciated his effort, so he let him sleep for more before everyone came. Si-eun and Soo became closer to each other since then. However, Si-eun still didn't get used to be open with other people. Young Bin met Suk-dae to talk about the job he offered him yesterday. Suk-dae was a member of a collection agency who lent money and collected debt, so he was down to do any high-paying job. After school, Suk tried to apologize to Si-eun for what he had done. He offered himself to accompany Si-eun to go to another school for a tutoring, but Si-eun ignored him. Suddenly, Si-eun was stopped by Young Bin and Suk-dae's gang. They took Si-eun with them. After Suk saw that, he reported it immediately to Soo. At first, Soo didn't care because it wasn't his business. He also had to go to work after this. But after Suk said that he would pay him double of his salary, Soo changed his mind. He was looking for Si-eun immediately. In a quiet alley, Si-eun was being intimidated by Suk-dae and his gang. Since Si-eun was a person who had always analyzed and calculated his actions, he managed to fight them back. But when Si-eun dropped his guard, he was getting attacked again. Young Bin used this moment to take revenge on him by beating him up relentlessly. He also tried to break Si-eun's hand so he couldn't study. But suddenly, Soo came to save Si-eun. He managed to defeat Young Bin and his friends with his skills. But their fight wasn't over. Suk-dae asked Soo to fight one by one. When Young Bin and his friends saw Si-eun alone, they wanted to beat him up again. The situation was getting worse. Young Bin wanted to attack Si-eun with a bottle. Soo couldn't stop him because Suk-dae kept attacking him. Luckily, Suk suddenly came to save Si-eun. Suk-dae finally left and decided to let Si-eun and his friends go. Meanwhile, Young Bin just stood there and realized that he had lost again. Since that incident, Si-eun and the others became closer to each other. Soo took Suk and Si-eun to the restaurant where he was working. He told them to help him working because they made him late to go to work. They spent their night together by having dinner at that restaurant. But as usual, Si-eun still didn't get used to spend time with people. Suk-dae's boss, who was called Gil-soo, was mad because of the incident. He didn't like if Suk-dae took another job. He punished Suk-dae by hitting his hand with a block of wood. After that, Suk-dae met Young Bin to ask him to bring Si-eun to him. Si-eun encountered a member of Suk-dae's gang called Young-yi who was stealing something at supermarket. Si-eun ignored her and pretended like he didn't see that. When he was about to leave after purchasing an umbrella, Young-yi was being friendly to him. She asked Si-eun to go to a restaurant with her. Si-eun couldn't do anything but to accept her offer. Young-yi confessed to Si-eun that she began to have a crush on him. She also asked for Si-eun's phone numbers. Gil-soo was collecting payments of debts from a high school student who owed him some money. That student gave his mother's car as a loan guarantee because he was unable to pay off his debts. Even though he had given Gil-soo a car as a loan guarantee, Gil-soo still threatened him to kill him and his parents if he didn't pay off his debts in 3 days. The next day, when Young Bin packed his things in the classroom, he asked Si-eun to have a conversation with him. Turned out, Young Bin wanted Si-eun to be a court witness to testify that he didn't own any fentanyl because he didn't want to be put in a youth detention center. He told him that he was the only hope for his parents. Si-eun felt bad for him, so he agreed to do what he wanted. Si-eun were heading to the court with his friends, but Young Bin took them to a car park of a building instead. Si-eun and his friends suspected him because they didn't go to the court. Apparently, Young Bin had lied and tricked them to meet Gil-soo and his gang. Gil-soo asked them to pay him $15,000 because he didn't have health insurance to cover for Suk-dae's broken hand. But Soo didn't remember that he injured Suk-dae's hand severely. Gil-soo was the one who broke Suk-dae's hand and then blamed Soo for it. He did it so he could get some money from him and his friends. Gil-soo told them to pay him in 3 days. If they couldn't do it, they had to lend money from him to pay him. We could see how sly and manipulative Gil-soo was. He even threatened to kill them if they refused to do what he told them. After that unwanted meeting, Si-eun and his friends were followed and watched by Gil-soo and his gang every day. Si-eun called Young-hee to ask for an explanation about the problem he was facing. He hoped that Young-hee could give him an important information. They finally agreed to meet at a restaurant. Young-hee told Si-eun about who Gil-soo was. Apparently, Gil-soo was a type of a person who would do anything for money, including murder. Young-hee told Si-eun to pay Gil-soo if he didn't want to be in any danger. She also told him that Gil-soo were friends with many gangsters, so it would be hard to run away from him. Bum-suk was stealing his father's watch so he could sell it and have some money to pay Gil-soo. Finally, 3 days had passed since Gil-soo threatened Si-eun and his friends. They had a meeting in a room. Bum-suk managed to collect $15,000 from selling his father's watch, but he told them that he got the money from his father. Si-eun and Soo were mad at him because they didn't believe that Bum-suk's father was willing to give him that much money. Even though they had the money, they refused to give that money to Gil-soo for free. They decided to call the police instead. Si-eun told them about the important information he got from Young-hee last night. Apparently, Gil-soo had an illegal gambling site for minors, especially for high school students. People would receive $50 for free for each account they registered on Gil-soo's gambling site, which was being operated overseas. Young-hee said that the gambling site was a fraud. The players would win and receive many bonuses for several first games, but after they got addicted to it, the site owner would use their addiction to take their money and defeat them in every game. Where there were gambling sites players, there were bound to be Gil-soo's gang. When those players ran out of money, Gil-soo's gang would approach them to lend them money so they could keep playing on the gambling site. As the consequence, the players would owe them money and couldn't pay their debts off because they had lost all of their money on the gambling site. It was one of Gil-soo's evil strategy to exploit children to get addicted to gambling, so they could lend money from him and gave him their valuables as long guarantees, such as cars, gold bars, etc. Young-hee also told Si-eun that Gil-soo put his valuables such as transactions, drugs, etc. in a strongbox. Because of that, Si-eun wanted to call police and bring them to that place. With all evidences inside of that strongbox, Gil-soo would get arrested by the policeman. After school, Gil-soo and his gang had been waiting for Si-eun and his friends. Soo said that he would meet Gil-soo by himself. He planned to ask Gil-soo to take him to his office to talk about Gil-soo's gambling site. When he arrived there, he would tell Si-eun about his location so Si-eun could call and bring the policeman there. At first, Gil-soo was surprised that Soo knew about his gambling site. Soo said that Suk-dae's cousin, Young Bin, told him about it. Gil-soo finally took Soo to his office with him because he had no option. Before they left, Young-hee told Gil-soo that she would stay at school to wait for Bum-suk and Si-eun. After that, Young-hee met Si-eun to give him the address of Gil-soo's office. Si-eun didn't realize it sooner that Soo didn't have to go with Gil-soo to get Gil-soo's address. Bum-suk was worrying about Soo. He wanted to follow him with a taxi. Si-eun let him go because he wanted to see if Young-hee gave him the right address. Suk-dae interrogated Young-hee for knowing Si-eun and revealing such an important information to him. Young-hee told him that she was sick of Gil-soo. She planned to call the police on him. She said that she couldn't live under Gil-soo's pressure forever. Soo arrived at Gil-soo's office. He gave Gil-soo's address to Si-eun immediately. It was the same address as the one that was given by Young-hee. Soo walked inside of the office. Since Gil-soo always kept his guard up, he asked Soo to give him his phone. He had been suspecting that Soo had planned something. Soo refused to give his phone. His head was hit very hard with an iron stick that he fell from his chair. Gil-soo finally found out about Soo's plan to call the police on him. After he found out about it, he packed his things and left that place immediately. Bum-suk arrived there and encountered Gil-soo, who was trying to run away. Bum-suk didn't know what had happened, so he tried to give Gil-soo the money, because the situation had become worse. Gil-soo ignored the money and took Bum-suk with him to leave that place. Si-eun was heading to Gil-soo's office. As he and the policeman arrived there, they didn't find anyone. The policemen put off their search because of that. They also realized that they didn't have an arrest warrant, so they couldn't proceed with their search. Because the policeman didn't help him, Si-eun broke into that house by climbing the wall and breaking the door. He was surprised to see blood on the floor. He thought that it was Soo's blood. He tried to call Soo on phone, but Soo didn't answer his call. Si-eun was shocked to find that the transactions, drugs, and Gil-soo's other valuables in the strongbox had been taken by Gil-soo. Suk-dae got a new problem. Gil-soo found out that Suk-dae and Young-hee had conspired with Si-eun against him. Gil-soo threatened to sell Young-hee's brother called Sung-chan if Suk-dae and Young-hee didn't come to Mangdodong. Suk-dae decided to meet Gil-soo. He gave his bank card to Young-hee so she could find a hotel to hide. But Young-hee didn't want Suk-dae to meet Gil-soo alone. She wanted to go with him. She asked Se-eun to download an application that enabled him to share location, so Se-eun could track Suk-dae and Young-hee's location. Gil-soo and his gang had been waiting for Suk-dae and Young-hee. Apparently, they had taken Bum-suk and Soo-hoo as their hostages. Se-eun was heading to Young-hee's location. Since Gil-soo had found out about Young-hee's conspiration, Suk-dae challenged Gil-soo for a fight. But because Suk-dae's hand was still severely broken, he had difficulty in fighting Gil-soo. He was attacked relentlessly by Gil-soo. Young-hee couldn't help Suk-dae because she was seized by Gil-soo's gang. Gil-soo wanted to kill Soo-hoo and Bum-suk, but suddenly Suk-dae got up and attacked him. Despite he had a little difficulty, he still fought Suk-dae. He was defeated by Gil-soo, who used a knife to attack him. Suddenly, Young-hee helped Suk-dae by hitting Gil-soo's head. But as a woman who didn't have as much strength as Gil-soo, she couldn't fight Gil-soo when he choked her. Luckily, the sound of siren from police car was heard. Gil-soo and his gang ran away quickly. Se-eun came and told Gil-soo to surrender because the policemen had surrounded them. Gil-soo and his gang came back after Se-eun helped Bum-suk and Soo-hoo to escape. Turned out, the siren sound only came from a phone. Gil-soo's gang and Se-eun's group got into a fight. Suk-dae and Young-hee were about to run away from that place when they saw some policemen arrive there. Turned out, Se-eun used the siren sound audio to trick Gil-soo and his gang, so they would think that the policeman wouldn't come. A policeman tried to arrest Gil-soo and his gang with his gun. Meanwhile, another policeman was chasing Suk-dae and Young-hee. Unfortunately, Gil-soo managed to escape from them. Se-eun chased Gil-soo by himself. Se-eun was chasing Gil-soo until he finally found him. They got into a fight. Despite Se-eun didn't have as much strength as Gil-soo, his attempt to fight Gil-soo managed to slow Gil-soo down. Suddenly Soo-hoo came and saved Se-eun. Soo-hoo and Gil-soo got into a fight. Despite Soo-hoo was an MMA fighter, he had a little difficulty in fighting Gil-soo by himself. Se-eun and Soo-hoo managed to defeat Gil-soo. They finally caught the criminal who had been terrorizing many students. Suk-dae surrendered himself to the police. He told Young-hee and Sung-chan to run away. This criminal case would be handled by a lawyer who happened to be the assistant of Bum-suk's father. That lawyer said that he wouldn't discuss about this case with Se-eun's parents, but he would tell Bum-suk's father about it. Since Bum-suk came from a highly respected and wealthy family, anyone who had harmed him would receive serious punishment. The lawyer asked Bum-suk to beat up Gil-soo as he pleased. He didn't care if they were in a police station. Bum-suk didn't want to beat up Gil-soo. Gil-soo mocked him by saying that he was the weakest among his friends. Gil-soo told him that Soo-hoo and Se-eun didn't consider him as their friend. Se-eun came out of the police station and saw Young-hee waiting him outside. Young-hee wanted to apologize to him and Soo-hoo. They went to hospital to visit Soo-hoo. Se-eun told Soo-hoo that Bum-suk's father wanted to keep the case a secret. It seemed like Bum-suk's father wanted to handle the case as if they were the one who caught Gil-soo and his gang. Se-eun didn't care about that. What important to him was that Gil-soo and his gang had been arrested. Besides, Bum-suk's father had paid off Soo-hoo's hospital costs. Apparently, Bum-suk's father was a member of parliament who was called Jin-won. He was a highly respected person. As her apology, Young-hee offered herself to accompany Soo-hoo at hospital. She could sleep on an empty bed. Young-hee said that she and Se-eun were dating. When Se-eun came home, he felt lonely again. Nobody there asked where he had been. He decided to return to the hospital. He also brought Soo-hoo's favorite food with him. Soo-hoo was surprised because Se-eun cared about him despite of his cold personality. At Bum-suk's house, Bum-suk's father scolded Bum-suk because he got involved with the police. He didn't like it because it could damage his good reputation. Then, he punished Bum-suk by hitting him with a golf stick. Se-eun's schoolmates admired Se-eun and his friends because they had caught Gil-soo and his gang. Since that incident, Se-eun and his friends became closer to each other. They wanted to hang out together. Se-eun told Bum-suk that Young-hee had become their friend and lived in Soo-hoo's house. Soo-hoo said he would ask Young-hee to hang out with them. Bum-suk felt like he was ignored because of Young-hee's presence. He felt like he was excluded from the group. He was mad when he found out that Soo-hoo didn't follow him back on Instagram. Soo-hoo even followed Young-hee even though they had been knowing each other for just one night. Since Young-hee joined their group, Soo-hoo talked to Young-hee more than he talked to Bum-suk. Bum-suk felt like Young-hee pretended as he didn't exist. Because of that, Bum-suk didn't enjoy their time together. When they went to a karaoke bar, Bum-suk became more unhappy, so he left their room to purchase some drinks to refresh himself. He stumbled upon some kids who had bullied him from his previous school. He hid from them because he wanted nothing to do with them. When he returned to their room, he took his anger out on Young-hee because Young-hee answered the phone call from his bullies. Bum-suk didn't like Young-hee even more, especially after he felt like Soo-hoo chose to be sided with Young-hee instead of him. His bullies came to their room. They were bothered by Se-eun's unfriendliness, so they chose to leave and call Bum-suk for another time. Se-eun didn't know who they were because Bum-suk didn't tell him anything about them. The next day, Bum-suk was sleeping in the classroom. he was disturbed by a noise from some students in his classroom. He told them to be quiet, but those students laughed at him. Bum-suk felt humiliated by them, so he approached them angrily. He became more mad at them after they said that Bum-suk had become conceited since he joined Seun and Suhu's group. Seun and Suhu tried to calm him down. Suhu was surprised when Bum-suk asked him to stop putting his hands around him. Since that incident, Bum-suk's mental state became unstable. He was also terrorized by his bullies who kept calling him on phone. He skipped classes for days and didn't tell anyone about how he was doing. Seun and Suhu decided to visit Bum-suk's house to check on him. They were astonished by Bum-suk's grand luxury house. The rumor that Bum-suk's parents were rich confirmed to be true. Bum-suk told them that he wasn't a biological son of their parents. Apparently, Bum-suk was adopted when his father became a politician. Bum-suk told them why he disappeared and skipped classes for days. Since he encountered his bullies from his previous school, those bullies kept calling him on phone and asking him to meet them. He got frustrated because of it. He even experienced flashbacks of his past traumatic incident when his bullies beat him every day. It was also one of the reasons why Bum-suk moved from his previous school. After Suhu heard about Bum-suk's story, he told Bum-suk to call his bullies. He wanted to make them regret what they had done and apologize to Bum-suk. Suhu and Seun went with Bum-suk to meet Bum-suk's bullies at a karaoke bar. With all of his courage, Bum-suk walked into their room and asked them to apologize to him. Bum-suk's bullies laughed at him after they heard what he said. They even refused to admit what they had done to him. They pretended like they had a good relationship with Bum-suk. But after Suhu threatened them, they finally apologized and regretted what they had done half-heartedly. Suddenly, Bum-suk slapped one of them. They were provoked by that slap. Bum-suk got out of control. He took a microphone and tried to hit them with it. When Suhu saw him, he stopped him immediately because they came to that place to make them apologize to Bum-suk, and not to take revenge on them. Bum-suk's bullies were surprised to see Bum-suk got out of control. Seun told them to stop calling Bum-suk from now on. Bum-suk and Suhu got into a fight because Bum-suk didn't like that Suhu stopped him from taking revenge on his bullies. Bum-suk also told Suhu that he was mad at him because he felt like he was treated as a subordinate by Suhu. He felt like Suhu didn't consider him as a friend because Suhu always bossed him around. Suhu disagreed with what Bum-suk said because they had always acted like friends all this time. He also said that he had helped Bum-suk for so many times. Suhu was angry when Bum-suk said that he would pay him for everything he had done for him. Seun intervened them both and let Bum-suk go. Bum-suk wasn't mad at Seun. He never got angry with him and always respected him. Finally, he decided to go home alone. Turned out, his bullies still kept calling him on phone and trying to find where he was. On his way home, Bum-suk encountered Young-chan and Taehan's group. At the same time, his bullies found where he was. Luckily, Young-chan and his group chose to rob those bullies instead of Bum-suk because they knew those bullies were students of an elite high school. Those bullies were afraid of Young-chan's group who were intimidating them. They couldn't do anything except doing what they wanted by transferring their money to them. Bum-suk just stood there and watched them. Suddenly, he beat up one of his bullies, who was the leader of the group, and then ran away. Taehan and Young-chan were happy to see Bum-suk got out of control. Bum-suk took his anger on his bullies for the bullying they had done to him, the abuse from his father, and the exclusion from his friends. After that incident, Bum-suk joined Young-chan's group. They drank together in a club. Bum-suk's new friends were fond of him when Bum-suk paid all of their bills. Bum-suk felt like he finally found friends who respected him. He was also followed by them on Instagram. He thought that he had found real friends. He decided to unfollow Suhu's Instagram account. The next day, Bum-suk came late to school because he got drunk last night. Seun tried to talk with him but Bum-suk ignored him. Bum-suk chose to talk with Young-chan's group instead. Young-chan's group thanked him for paying for their drinks and the hotels where they slept with some women. Apparently, Bum-suk still got the money that he earned from selling his father's watch. Because Seun thought Bum-suk had changed, he confronted him about it. At first, Bum-suk said that nothing happened, but finally, Bum-suk told him that he was mad at Suhu for treating him like a subordinate and not a friend. Bum-suk hanged out again with Young-chan and his group in a club. This time, they also hanged out with Young Bin and his schoolmates. Young Bin were glad to see Bum-suk. He introduced Bum-suk to his female friends and told them that he was a member of Parliament's son. After those girls heard that, they flirted with Bum-suk. Young Bin also introduced Bum-suk to a fighter at his school named Woo-young. Then, they talked about Suhu. They were mad at Suhu because he always acted like a boss and looked down on others. Young Bin wanted to take revenge on Suhu. Suhu picked Seun up from a tutoring. He taught Seun to work as a delivery courier. Then, Seun talked about Bum-suk. He thought that Bum-suk was being used by Young-chan's group after they found out that Bum-suk came from a wealthy family. He thought that they befriended Bum-suk just for his money. But Suhu thought differently. He thought that Bum-suk was the one who used Young-chan's group. As they became closer to each other, they would do anything that Bum-suk wanted them to do and make him a popular student. Day by day, Bum-suk became closer to Young-chan's group. Bum-suk felt like he was really admired and respected by his new friends. Bum-suk even moved to another desk to sit closer to Young-chan and Tae-hun. Si-eun was worrying about Bum-suk after he saw it. He believed that Bum-suk wasn't a troublemaker. He thought that Bum-suk only did that because he felt so lonely. Si-eun told Young-chan's group to stay away and stop taking money from Bum-suk, but Young-chan's group ignored him and said that Bum-suk was the one who wanted to do those things. At lunchtime, the students stood in line in order to get their lunches. Suddenly, Young-chan's group came and jumped in line. Soo-hoo was annoyed by them. He warned Young-chan and his friends to stand in line. Bum-suk just stood there and refused to do it. Soo-hoo was mad at him. He slammed Bum-suk to the ground. Si-eun told him to stop. Bum-suk left that place with hard feelings. He asked Young-chan to find a person whom he could pay to beat up Soo-hoo. Young-chan recommended him to hire Woo-young, Young Bin's classmate. From some videos that had been uploaded on internet, they could see that Young-chan was really good in fighting. It was also said that Woo-young would join UFC. Finally, Bum-suk was taken to Woo-young. Bum-suk would pay Woo-young $1,000 if he could beat up Soo-hoo. He wanted Woo-young to do it on Saturday when Soo-hoo would have birthday. Woo-young accepted his offer and then left that place. Tae-hun told a story that Woo-young was once beaten up by Soo-hoo in a competition in the past. Young-chan believed that Woo-young would win this time. They planned to injure Soo-hoo so he would have difficulty in fighting Woo-young. They cut the brake cable of Soo-hoo's motorcycle while he was working. As they expected, Soo-hoo was unable to ride his motorcycle properly that he finally had an accident. From that accident, Soo-hoo had to walk with a limp because his leg got injured. Soo-hoo believed that Bum-suk was the one who did this, but he didn't say anything to Si-eun. Today was Saturday, which also Soo-hoo's birthday. Si-eun and Young-hee prepared everything to surprise Soo-hoo. Bum-suk tried to call Soo-hoo on phone to ask him to meet him, but Soo-hoo didn't answer his call. Bum-suk sent some messages to Young-hee. He said that he wanted to meet Young-hee to give Soo-hoo a birthday gift. Bum-suk told Young-hee not to tell anyone about it because he wanted to surprise Soo-hoo. Young-hee didn't tell Si-eun and Soo-hoo that she went out to meet Bum-suk. At first, Bum-suk was being nice to her, but suddenly he smiled because his plan worked out. He planned to take Young-hee as a hostage so Soo-hoo would come to meet him. Si-eun and Soo-hoo were waiting for Young-hee who still hadn't returned. Si-eun accidentally saw Soo-hoo's phone in which he received some messages from Bum-suk. Bum-suk sent an address for Soo-hoo to come and meet him. He also said that he had taken Young-hee as his hostage. Si-eun realized that Young-hee was trapped by Bum-suk. Si-eun replied Bum-suk's messages by saying that he would come there. After that, he deleted the chat and told Soo-hoo that he would go outside. He didn't want Soo-hoo to know anything about it. Si-eun came to Bum-suk's location alone with a wrench in his hand. Everybody was surprised to see Si-eun instead of Soo-hoo. After Si-eun found Young-hee, he asked her to run away with him quickly. Si-eun fought Young-chan and his friends with the wrench he brought with him. Meanwhile, Young-hee called the police. Young Bin was glad to see Si-eun because he wanted to take revenge on him, but he was still unable to defeat Si-eun. Si-eun took a crowbar and wanted to fight all of them with it, but suddenly Woo-young came and attacked Si-eun. Si-eun was unable to fight Woo-young back even though he had a crowbar. Young Bin wanted to use this moment to attack Si-eun. Bum-suk tried to stop him and told him that Si-eun had nothing to do with them. Bum-suk said he didn't hold grudges against Si-eun. Young Bin didn't care about what he said because it wasn't only about Soo-hoo, but also about his personal grudges for Si-eun. Eventually, Si-eun, who had been lying weakly on the ground, was beaten up relentlessly by Young Bin. Young Bin's friends joined Young Bin to attack him. It was too painful for Bum-suk to watch it, so he left that place. Woo-young asked Bum-suk to reschedule his meeting with Soo-hoo. He also asked him to transfer the money to him because he had defeated one person. Bum-suk didn't even ask him to beat up Si-eun. The sound of siren from police car was heard. All of them ran away immediately from that place, except Si-eun, who was lying weakly on the ground. Soo just realized that he had slept. He found that his friends still hadn't returned to his birthday party. Si-eun was taken to an ambulance by the policeman who came to that place. Young-hee told the policeman about what had happened. Suddenly, Si-eun woke up from his sleep. He told the policeman that he was all alone and it was only an accident. He also told Young-hee not to tell Soo anything about this incident. Si-eun called Bum-suk on phone to warn him to stop what he was doing. Si-eun had to be hospitalized because of that incident. He remembered when his father and his mother got into an argument when he was a child. Apparently, his father didn't want Si-eun in his life. Si-eun was mad at him when he found out about it. He didn't like his father since then. He still didn't like him even though he lived with his father now. Si-eun didn't tell his father about the truth of the incident last night. He just told him that he fell from a staircase. But his father knew that Si-eun got into a fight with other students. He grew impatient with him and scolded him for behaving recklessly. Suddenly, he got quiet after Si-eun told him about his feelings. Si-eun asked his father since when he cared about him. At home, Bum-suk was mad at himself. Because of him, Si-eun had to endure violent attacks from Young Bin's group. he stayed in his room and refused to go to school. Because of that, his father sent someone to watch over him. He planned to transfer Bum Suk to a school in Philippines. Suhu still attended school like usual. He was clueless about what had happened, but he sensed that there was something wrong because Seun disappeared and didn't attend school. He also didn't see Bum Suk at school anymore. Suhu tried to call Seun on phone, but Seun didn't answer his call. Seun told Suhu that he didn't attend school because he had a family problem. Suhu asked Youngie why Youngie and Seun didn't return to his birthday party. Youngie didn't answer his question. She only apologized to him. Suhu came to Seun's house, but there was nobody there. He was heading home while wondering about what was actually happening. Finally, Suhu asked Jin Chan and Taehan about where Bum Suk was because he had no option. They told him that they didn't know where Bum Suk was because they were unable to contact him. Suhu said that he wanted Bum Suk to give him some money to fix his motorcycle that had been damaged by Bum Suk. They were surprised that Suhu knew that Bum Suk was the one who damaged it, so they asked him how he found out about that. Young Chan's group was talking about Seun who didn't attend school because of what they had done that night. Suhu heard about their conversation. Finally, Suhu beat them up and asked them to tell him about what happened to Seun that night. Because Young Chan couldn't take his beating anymore, he told Suhu everything about what had happened that night. After Suhu found out about it, he visited Youngie again to ask where Seun was being hospitalized. Youngie told him that Seun would return home tonight. Suhu came to Seun's house. He was glad to see Seun. He didn't tell Seun that he knew about what happened to Seun. Seun hid his wounded hand from Suhu. Suhu came to Seun's house to tell him that they would have examinations in one day, so he hoped Seun could attend school. Bum Suk received another punishment from his father. His father was furious with what Bum Suk had done. He was ashamed with him. He asked Bum Suk not to tell the public that he was his father. Because Bum Suk had had enough, he decided to leave his house that night. His assistant tried to stop him, but Bum Suk ignored him. Bum Suk ran away from home with a taxi. His assistant took a picture of his taxi so he could track him. In the taxi, Bum Suk found that his friends had called him on phone for several times. He received some messages from Suhu. Suhu was with Young Bin. Suhu was punishing Young Bin. He also asked him where Bum Suk was. Young Bin told him that he didn't know. Suddenly, Suhu received a phone call from Bum Suk. Bum Suk asked him to meet him in a gym. Bum Suk also called Woo-young on phone to ask him to prepare himself because he would fight Suhu soon. Suhu came to meet Bum Suk in the gym. He saw Young Chong, Taehan, Bum Suk, and others there. Apparently, Suhu came there to apologize to Bum Suk. He told Bum Suk that Bum Suk was supposed to take his anger out on him and not on other innocent people. Bum Suk rejected his apology. Suhu was mad at him because of it. After that, Woo-young called Suhu. He asked him to get into the boxing ring and have a fight with him. Suhu was surprised to see Woo-young there. They had met before in a competition where Woo-young was defeated by Suhu. Suhu accepted Woo-young's challenge. He asked him to give him 1 minute to do warming up by beating up everyone there. After Suhu finished warming up, he began his fight with Woo-young. Woo-young recorded them in a video. He swore that he would take revenge on Suhu by defeating him this time. In the beginning of the fight, Suhu and Woo-young were even because they both had good fighting skill. But Woo-young knew that Suhu had a wounded leg due to a motorcycle accident, so he focused his attack on the left side of Suhu's body. Suhu had a little difficulty because of his wound, but he managed to push Woo-young down with his smack. Taehan cheated in the game by pulling Suhu's leg. Suhu lost his focus that he was kicked hard by Woo-young. Suhu laid weakly on the ground because he had a kick in his head. Bum Suk used this moment to beat him up relentlessly. Young Chan and Taehan, who had been sick of Suhu this whole time, joined Bum Suk to beat up Suhu relentlessly. The assistant and lawyer of Bum Suk's father came to pick Bum Suk up. He forced Bum Suk to go home with him. Suddenly, everyone was surprised and panicked when they found out that Suhu didn't breathe anymore. They escaped quickly from that situation except Young Han and Taehan because they were stopped by Bum Suk's lawyer. Bum Suk's lawyer asked them to testify to this problem in front of the policeman. Bum Suk regretted what he had done. He cried because he thought that Suhu had died. Young Yi and Seun were looking for Suhu because they hadn't heard anything from him since Suhu found out about the incident that night. Young Yi and Seun suspected that Suhu took revenge on Young Chan's group, but they didn't find Suhu anywhere. Eventually, this problem would be handled by Bum Suk's lawyer. He wanted to keep this problem as a secret, so he told Young Chong, Taehan, and Woo-young to tell about what had happened according to the narrative that he had created. The narrative would go like this. They were taking an exercise together. Suddenly, Suhu passed out when he took a break by himself. They had deleted the video that had been recorded by Woo-young. They had also taken CCTV so there would be no evidence of what had happened. Bum Suk's lawyer also pretended to be Suhu to tell Seun that Suhu was alright and was busy taking an exercise. Bum Suk received another punishment for what he had done. His father was speechless with rage when he found out about what Bum Suk had done. He threatened to kill Bum Suk after he finished his school in Philippines and returned home. But Bum Suk didn't care about what his father said. He was worrying about Suhu. The next day, the school had examinations. As usual, Seun came early to school. It was his first day of attending school after the incident that night. He was worrying about Suhu because he hadn't heard anything from him. Suhu even didn't attend school that day. Seun couldn't stay focused while he was taking his examination. As the consequence, he had many incorrect answers. But Seun didn't worry about it this time. He was worrying about Suhu more than he was worrying about his examination. After he finished taking his examination, he got news from Young-i. She told him that Suhu was being hospitalized. She cried when she said that Suhu's condition was critical because he was in coma. Apparently, Suhu hadn't died. Young-chan thought he had died because he was panicked that night. Suhu only fell into a coma, so he was admitted to hospital for treatment. After Seun found out about that, he left his school and went straight to hospital to visit Suhu. There was only Suhu's grandmother in Suhu's room. She was sad because Suhu hadn't woken up. Seun began to cry when he saw his best friend laying weakly on bed. Bum-suk had been staying in his room. His lawyer came to tell him that Suhu didn't die, but only fell into a coma. There was still a hope to save Suhu. Bum-suk's lawyer asked Bum-suk to keep the incident that night as a secret or they would kill Suhu. They needed to do that to keep Bum-seok's father's good reputation as a member of parliament. The next day, Seun went to Ji-sung High School. It was Young Bin's new high school. He came to that school to find Young Bin. When Young Bin arrived in his classroom, suddenly Seun came and attacked him by hitting his head repeatedly on his desk. He also stabbed Young Bin's shoulder with a pen. Seun asked Young Bin about what happened that night. He asked if Bum-suk was the one who did it. Young Bin said he didn't know since he wasn't there. It was because his fingers were broken after being injured by Suhu that night. Before Seun looked for Bum-suk, Young Bin told him that he only knew a little about what happened that night after he watched a video that was sent by Woo Young. Seun found out about what actually happened from that video. Even though Young Bin had nothing to do with it, Seun still beat him up. After that, Seun was looking for Woo Young. He tried to beat him up with an iron stick in his hand. Unfortunately, Woo Young had expected his movement since he was a fighter. They finally got into a fight. Woo Young looked down on Seun because Seun didn't have any fighting skill. Seun chose to keep fighting him. He remembered about what Suhu taught him if he got into a fight. Unfortunately, what he had taught couldn't be learned quickly. Seun was attacked repeatedly by Woo Young, but with his intelligence, Seun managed to have the upper hand. He used Woo Young's shoelace to fight him back. He even managed to avoid Woo Young's smack. Woo Young smacked a barbell instead and injured his hand. Seun used this moment to hit Woo Young's foot with a barbell. Woo Young tried to find an excuse about what happened that night, but Seun refused to forgive him. He broke Woo Young's foot with a barbell again. Bum-suk and his father were heading to Bum-suk's school to say goodbye and inform them that Bum-suk would move to another school abroad. But suddenly, Young-i came and stopped them. She asked Bum-suk to take accountability for what he did to Suhu. Instead of apologizing to her, Bum-suk told Young-i that he did that because Young-i came to his and his friend's life. He and his friends used to be happy and close to each other, but after Young-i came to their life, Bum-suk felt excluded from his group. The teachers at Bum-suk's school had been waiting for Bum-suk and his father because they knew who Bum-suk's father was. After that, Bum-suk was taking an examination. Meanwhile, his father was pretending to ask about the student who got severely injured. The teachers said that there was a student who got severely injured. They told him that student got injured because he passed out when he took an exercise at a gym. Bum-suk's father was glad to hear it because nobody knew that his son was the one who did it. While everyone was taking an examination, Seun came to school and took a fire extinguisher. He came to his classroom with a uniform that was covered with blood. His classmates and teacher were surprised to see his appearance. Suddenly, Seun attacked Taehan with the fire extinguisher. Bum-suk looked at him without a single fear. Young-chan tried to help Taehan, but Seun hit his head with the fire extinguisher. Young-chan fell unconscious. Seun continued to attack Taehan. After he took revenge on those two people, Seun approached Bum-suk. Bum-suk felt helpless and regretted about what he had done. He told Seun to beat him up as he pleased. But Seun couldn't attack Bum-suk because he still considered him as a friend. Finally, they burst into tears. Seun left Bum-suk on the floor without throwing a single punch on him. All students at that school were terrified by Seun. Some teachers tried to stop him. Seun took his anger on the window because he hated how the school chose to keep this problem as a secret. They didn't do anything to help his friend who was in coma. After that incident, Seun returned to the hospital to visit Suhu, who was still in coma. He imagined that Suhu had woken up from his coma and told him that he had overreacted to his problem. Then, they apologized to each other because they failed to take care of themselves. Finally, Bum-suk attended a school in Philippines. Meanwhile, Suhu was still in a coma. Young-i decided to leave Seun and Suhu because she realized that she had ruined their friendship. At first, Seun was going to be put in a youth detention center because of what he had done, but after Bum-suk's father saw the video that showed how Suhu fell into coma, he decided not to say anything about it. He just made sure that there would be no school that would accept Si-eun in Seoul. Apparently, there was a high school that would still accept Si-eun. It was Injang High School. Finally, Si-eun moved to that school. He was accompanied by his father and mother. His father told him that what he had done before wasn't entirely his mistake. This was the situation at Injang High School. It was a low-ranked high school because the students there were troublemakers. The school didn't forbid their students to have tattoos. Si-eun introduced himself to the class. When he took a sit, one of his classmates approached him. It seemed like he was the leader of a gang in that classroom. Si-eun chose to ignore him. That student was mad at him. Si-eun stared at him coldly. That student felt defeated by him.
뭐? 개새끼가 지금 뭐라?
There was a student with tattoos on his body who was watching Si-eun because Si-eun had defeated Woo Young.
This series begins by showing a male police detective named Nam Gun-wook being interviewed by a television program that will air about his life as police detective. Gun-wook says that he is currently working on a serial murder case that started 6 months ago. At that time, a woman is brutally murdered as she is walking home. Looking at the killer who brutally murdered the victims, Gun-wook couldn't help but worry about his own safety, as he might lose his own life when he confronted the killer. One night, a reporter accompanies Gun-wook on patrol. While it was raining, they see a woman wearing a red umbrella passing in front of them, followed by a man carrying a knife. Upon seeing that, Gun-wook rushes out of his car and chases after him, while the reporter follows him with a camera. Gun-wook runs quickly as the killer tried to escape. The reporter tries to catch up with Gun-wook, but he lost his track, until the reporter finally finds Gun-wook covered in blood. Gun-wook lost his life that night. His death was a deep sorrow for the police, especially for Police Commissioner Nam Gu-hyun, who was Gun-wook's father. After the funeral, Gu-hyun asks one of his subordinates about the whereabouts of a man named Oh Gu-tak, but his subordinate questions why Gu-hyun is asking about a man that nicknamed the Mad Dog by the police. The scene then switches and shows Oh Gu-tak, who has just woken up from his sleep. Gu-tak starts his day as usual. He lives alone and doesn't seem to care much about the life he lives. While having breakfast, Gu-tak gets a call from Gu-hyun, who's asking him to come see him. Gu-tak then meets Gu-hyun at a diner. Seeing Gu-tak's shabby appearance and pale face, Gu-hyun suggests that Gu-tak have to change his lifestyle and think more about his health. Gu-tak ignores Gu-hyun's words and immediately asks Gu-hyun's purpose for wanting to see him. Gu-hyun then tells him about the incident that killed his son and asks Gu-tak to capture the serial killer who killed Gun-wook. Upon hearing that, Gu-tak looks surprised as he doesn't expect the police to want him back on duty. Gu-tak then remembers the past when he found his daughter lying lifeless after someone stabbed her to death. Gu-tak was devastated by his only daughter's death, and from then on, Gu-tak dedicated his life to hunting down criminals and beating them before throwing them in jail. Gu-hyun asks Gu-tak to capture the person who killed his son and bring the killer before him, as Gu-hyun intends to avenge Gun-wook's death with his own hands. After saying that to Gu-tak, Gu-hyun leaves the restaurant and meets his female subordinate, Yoo Mi-young, who asks Gu-hyun about Gu-tak, who was nicknamed the Mad Dog. Gu-hyun explained to Mi-young that Gu-tak was a police officer who did not hesitate to use violence when arresting and interrogating criminals, and that's why Gu-tak was nicknamed the Mad Dog. Afterward, Mi-young is seen following Gu-tak as he walks back to his house. At an intersection,